Hello and welcome to the Highway to Health show. I'm your host, Dr. E, the Stem Cell Guy. In this episode, I'm joined by Julie Michelson. Julie is an autoimmunity wellness expert who creates amazing transformations in the lives of her clients through her coaching business. Having gone through her own health struggles, she's excited to help her clients skip the hardships of figuring it out on their own and start living joyful lives of true wellness. As you will hear in this interview, Julie was almost crippled with rheumatoid arthritis. She was on up to 10 prescription medications at a time and living a miserable life. She was in pain, without energy, and putting additional worries on her children. Stick around to learn how she discovered the underlying cause of her symptoms and was able to not only get rid of her prescriptions and recover her energy, but also get a renewed and vibrant joy for life and for helping others do the same by switching careers and becoming a health coach in various nutrition and lifestyle modalities. She now works remotely with clients from all over the world via one-on-one coaching and has even created the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity framework to guide patients in making the changes necessary to reduce inflammation and optimize healing. Before we go on to today's interview, though, let me remind you that this show is a labor of love, which I do in my spare time. My current day job is running a company where we help doctors and other practicing health professionals become better entrepreneurs, allowing them to serve more patients and provide a better life for their families. If you are a health professional or you know of one who deserves to be doing better in business, check out pgformula.com. This episode is sponsored and produced by podcastinthebox.co. I remember when I first launched my podcast, I had been thinking about doing it for years. I had read 2 books on the subject and signed up for an online course, and I still did not launch that podcast. You see, back then I was running a busy stem cell practice, teaching at university, and traveling for conferences, so it was hard to find the time to start and maintain a new project like this podcast, which is where Pockets in the Box came in. The team at Pockets in the Box handled everything, and I mean everything that had to do with planning, launching, editing, publishing, and marketing a podcast. Because proper podcasting is not just about buying a microphone and rambling on. There is so much more than that. If you're a busy entrepreneur, solopreneur, or even a wannapreneur looking to build a personal brand to instill trust in your clients so they will want to buy your products or services, but you don't have the time or frankly the desire to learn the technical side of podcasting, Pockets in the Box might be right for you. To find out more and see if your idea is worthy of a podcast, just head on over to podcastinthebox.co and click on the appropriate button. When prompted, make sure to mention Dr. E's Highway to Health show in the How Did He Hear About Us section. Now, speaking of a podcast production, I want to ask you to please bear with me and my guests in this and a few of the upcoming episodes since they've been recorded during COVID, where both them and I were both at home, usually on a shared family Wi-Fi, and so there's a few drops in connection. The guys at Pockets in the Box do a great job at salvaging most of the conversation, but there's usually certain places where there's, nothing that can be done to avoid it. I think they're barely noticeable, but I'll let you be the judge of that. In any case, let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Julie Michelson. And remember, you are on the highway to health, and I'm your guide to get you there.
Are you ready to live ageless? Want to discover alternative health choices, cutting-edge nutrition, and fitness for the entire family? Welcome to Highway to Health Show with your host, Dr. E, the Stem Cell Guy, where Dr. E helps you live ageless. And now, here's your host, Dr. E.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Highway to Health show. I am your host, Dr. E, the Stem Cell Guy, and sitting in front of me is Julie Michelson, whom I'll let introduce herself before I butcher her name again. So Julie, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm doing well, thanks.
That's amazing to hear. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started doing what you're currently doing?
Absolutely. Like many of us in the wellness world, I got here through my own health journey. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis about probably 17 years ago now and spent a full decade in decline. Went the conventional medicine route, had amazing doctors who had plenty of prescriptions to share, Unfortunately, none of them helped. And so about a decade into that journey, I was on 10 prescriptions. I was not as active and involved in my life as I wanted to be. I was a single mom for all of that time. And my daughter came to me one day and said, "Mom, please don't die." She was afraid I was going to leave them. My dad had passed away at age 54, and he had seemed healthy till he left us. So it wasn't a strange childhood fear. It was based in reality of her watching my health decline. And so I just started to learn and do and try, and like, okay, I know the doctors told me I couldn't heal, and I believed them. But I thought, well, I have to try. And so that began my journey of many years of experimentation and education, of slowly, step by step, putting my health back together to get off of all my medications, have a fully active life, pain-free, with energy.
That's
And
that
so my gratitude for that has made it my mission to help others do the same.
That's incredible. So you're currently completely off medications. After being on 10 medications, 10 prescriptions for rheumatoid arthritis, you're currently like totally off medications, no pain, full of energy.
Correct.
That doesn't happen. Come on.
When I heard stories like mine, I'm kind of ashamed to say at this point, years ago, when I'd hear about people who healed, the story in my head was, oh, they must not have really been as sick as me, right? Like, there's no way. So, and I help people do it every day. This is what I do. I watch it over and over. It works.
That's incredible. And it is, you know what, it is part of our upbringing not upbringing, but our background or education in medical school and traditional Western medicine. That's how we're trained. I've shared before in the podcast that my background in regenerative medicine, we treated with stem cells a lot of conditions that were previously considered untreatable. And we saw some astounding changes, like patients with, we have this one patient from Bermuda, and I will always remember her. And she came to see us while she was waiting to have a lung transplant in a hospital in New York. And the survival rate of a lung transplant for 5 years is about 5 to 15%. So if you're within that 15%, you might live to 5 years after the lung transplant. Then she came down for treatment, and she had a stem cell treatment, and she dramatically improved her respiratory function test, everything, her lifestyle, everything improved tremendously, right? And so she went back home to Bermuda and then went to her follow-up in New York a couple of months later. And the doctors over there, who were already ready to operate on her and do a lung transplant, when they saw the new respiratory function tests and they heard the story, you know what they said? "We must have misdiagnosed you. It's impossible for you to be like this now."
I have
I'm shocked.
goosebumps. Yes.
She literally thought, you know what? These guys are going to think that this is the best thing since sliced bread. They're going to go down to Cancun. They're going to find out what they've been doing, and they're going to start doing it with all the patients. And the automatic response was, "Well, we must have misdiagnosed you."
Sure. Because the rest is out of their concept of reality. So,
well, in general, that's what we've been
Yeah.
trained. And just
Right.
like you said it at the beginning, you said, my doctors told me that there was no solution, and I believed them.
Yep.
They've been told that since the
Right.
first day of medical school. If somebody comes in with diabetes, they're going to have it for the rest of their life. If somebody comes
Right.
down with rheumatoid arthritis, they're going to have it for the rest of their life. These are conditions that we do not cure. As a matter of fact, we're
Right.
trained that only surgery in certain cases cures something. Like if you have a burst appendix and they go in and they remove it, then you're cured. Other than that, you're not. So
And if I have a burst appendix, I'm going to my Western trained surgeon for sure. Like
Absolutely.
that's what they're there for. And that, yeah, there's no concept of the body being able to heal itself given the right tools in that
Exactly.
approach. Yeah.
So what do you attribute the success that you've had so far to? What do you think is, I mean, I know that it's a series of things. It's probably not just the one thing that you did. It's like, oh, I discovered this. But what was that first step that made you think, you know what? I think they might be wrong and there might be, a solution here.
Yes. For me, my first step was diet change. I had kind of comically gone gluten-free to support my son who was 12 and diagnosed with celiac. And I thought, well, I'm going to, just support him and we'll just go gluten-free together. And that was when I had the first aha moment of, ooh, my pain is a little bit better now. It wasn't gone, but all of a sudden, for the first time in a decade, I was improving. And so I started to learn more and, create more diet change and experiment with different foods. And it took a long time, but I found the diet that was right for my body. And one of the things being high fat. I grew up in a low fat family. We thought we were being so healthy.
Right.
And so I literally had starved my body of healthy fats. And so that was a big key for me to return to full health.
Yeah, we're starting to see a lot of autoimmune disorders that do have that component. As a matter of fact, I would say that probably all of them. We treated a lot of children with autism back at the clinic, and one of the things when we first started doing it, I had no idea what autism was. I'm not even ashamed of accepting that. I had gone through medical school, I had graduated, and I didn't really know what autism was. I thought it was a neurological disorder, and then I realized that it was a GI issue that was triggering our immune system, and it was more like an autoimmune disorder that was causing all these different symptoms. And just by fixing the diet, when we saw the changes that some of these kids had just with a gluten-free, casein-free diet, it was super eye-opening. So what was the next step for you? Like once you notice and you go like, oh wow, if I remove gluten, I improve. What was your next step? What was the next thing that you removed? Was there something, or what was the next thing you did?
I actually went, from gluten-free to grain-free. So that was my next step. And again, I felt an incremental improvement with that. But I joke, I was doing paleo all wrong at that point. I was still consuming plenty of sugars, just sugars from clean sources, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it really, because I was self-taught, it really was very gradual. I don't know if there were functional medicine health coaches back then, but I sure would have loved to get a little guidance. And then I went on for about 2 years. I remember telling everybody, thank goodness I can still eat dairy. Because my family was in the dairy business my whole life, generations. And I was under that misguided notion because I had never removed dairy.
Exactly.
So I thought I tolerated it just fine. So for me, that was the last diet change that was like truly life-changing, to really just bring that inflammation down to way closer to a normal level.
And how did you actually start learning what things to remove? Was it hit and miss, or was it that you were following certain guidelines, or how were you learning these things?
So my journey was hit or miss. Like I said, some of it was serendipitous, right? Like, healing through my son. Come to realize now, I too have been celiac my whole life, but I had no idea. Nobody, because back then nobody was testing, thinking gut connection. There was no such thing. And so, just learning and experimenting and researching, and what kind of pulled it all together for me, and what got me to add the healthy fat back in, was I found Dave Asprey and the Bulletproof Diet. And I thought, and I've never done a diet in my life, so it felt really strange. And I would choke down the fat because, again, it's like my head knows it's good for me, but like I'm not used to it. And that was the missing link for me, was, to get.
It's funny you bring that up, because I was a recovering vegan for a while, right? And it was actually through Dave Asprey and reading Bulletproof Diet that I started to see things differently. And I was living in Cancun back then, and the only source, or the only grass-fed butter that I could get a hold of was Anchor butter, but they only sold it at Costco. And they only sold it in 10-pound bricks. I'm not even kidding. So the first time I showed up with one of those at home, my wife, when we had not been eating butter at all, she's like, "What the heck is this?" And I'm like, "It's butter, because we're going to start eating butter." And she's like, "How much butter are you planning to eat?" So we had to actually, we'd chop off smaller blocks and we'd freeze them, and
Sure.
and we had butter for like a month, but even longer. But that's how we got all started. So you do your bulletproof coffee as well?
I do. And I did give up coffee for about 6 months, 2 years ago, just to make sure, it was okay. And I did bulletproof tea.
Okay.
And thank goodness clean coffee agrees with me really well. So I love my bulletproof coffee.
Now that you mentioned about clean coffee, and I want to back up a little bit about what you mentioned on gluten. And I think that gluten is one of the things that we don't recognize for what it is a lot of the times, because if somebody doesn't show up to the doctor's office with explosive diarrhea and bloating and incredible abdominal pain, they're not celiac and they should be able to tolerate gluten. And what I always tell people is, like, just remove it for a couple of weeks and then have a bowl of pasta and you tell me how you feel. I mean, right now I can tell right now when, for instance, if I drink a beer or if I have a pizza or certain things that have gluten that I normally would just ignore and just consume normally, my nose immediately, like about an hour later, I start getting like a super stuffy nose. And it's like, yeah, it's the beer or it's the pizza or it's this. And it's not things that I have regularly. Like we had 12 beers here when my father-in-law visited about 6 months ago. And we still have a few over there, right? But when I do, and it's because I completely forget about it. But when I do, I start getting these symptoms, and it's crazy how often I talk to somebody and they've experienced the same thing. Even my wife grew up eating bread here in Spain, and now she realizes that when she has it, she has those symptoms again. So it's crazy.
And that is the absolute trick. Everybody that I work with, we do some form of an elimination diet, depending on the level. If it's an autoimmune client who's got a long history and is complicated, we might shoot straight for the autoimmune paleo approach, because I'm a certified coach in that as well. But whatever level, until you remove the food, your body really cannot send a clear signal.
Exactly.
I see it time and time again. I've never had a client do an elimination diet and not have reactions to foods that they've been eating forever. Like, nobody's ever said every food is perfect. It's just never happened. And everybody's always shocked, but I've been eating that my whole life. How come it makes me so sick?
And you know what? That's actually a very interesting thing that you just mentioned, because not every food is bad for every person.
Sure.
I mean, there's a few that are bad for everyone, like processed sugar, and that's not even food, right? But not every food is bad for every single person, and we need to understand and recognize that, because a lot of the times we have been exposed to it for so long that we don't know what it is like to not have those symptoms. And that's why, our son is 2.5 right now, and he's never had gluten in his life, ever.
Lucky boy.
Ever. Because we are like adamant about it. We're obnoxious about it.
I'm with you.
And people say, like, well, but he's like, someday he'll have, cake or he'll have this. And I'm like, yes, but I want him to have it when he is conscious, when he's aware and he can link how he's currently feeling with what he had about an hour ago. And then he'll be empowered to make a decision based on, I know what's the price that I will have to pay. Like I do right now. I know that if I eat a pizza, I'm going to get a stuffy nose. So if I don't want to have a stuffy nose, or if I'm going to record a podcast, I cannot have a pizza before that. So,
right.
it's just about knowing the price. Now, why don't you share with me and with us really a little bit more about your practice? What is it that you're currently helping your clients with now that you've discovered?
So I help clients all over the world with literally any kind of autoimmune disorder. And under that is the large umbrella, really any inflammation related disorder, which is pretty much most chronic illness. So, while my passion is autoimmunity, I get amazing results with people with, bad cardiac markers or blood sugar issues. We get the inflammation down and it all works the same. So over the years, I've created what's called Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. And it's just through my journey, my education, my clients' journeys of, a structure of all of the lifestyle areas that need to be addressed. As we mentioned before, diet's not the only one. It's a big one. It's easy to go after, but there's a whole combination of things. We work with stress management and sleep and movement, getting rid of toxins in the household. All of those together, all of a sudden, again, we've created that environment where the body can heal.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable.
I think those are, I'm very happy to see the world starting to recognize all those different things, because you're absolutely right. I mean, diet is huge because it is the one thing that we do every day, 3 times a day, right? Sometimes even more. And everything that we're putting in is having an effect in our bodies. And a lot of the times we don't recognize it because we think that we're just eating or we're just getting energy, and we don't recognize the whole host of things that are happening in our body depending what we're currently eating. But we need to also recognize the importance of our mindset, the importance of our mindfulness, the importance of our emotions, the importance of our sleep, the importance of our physical activity. So all those things are incredibly valuable. I just recorded earlier today a podcast with Maruka from Raw Optics, and he talks a lot about his like diet, right? And about how we are affected from this lack of sun exposure. And these are things that we're not used to considering. So I think that it's really, really good that you're taking that approach and you're not just saying, well, I'll help you with your diet and then ignoring everything else. Now, there is one thing that I have failed miserably at explaining to our listeners, and most of the experts that I've brought on, because they have this background in science and they're doctors, and we're naturally bad at explaining things in an understandable way. So can you help me shed some light for our listeners on why is inflammation bad for us in our everyday life? Because inflammation is one of our repair mechanisms when we hit ourselves or things like that. But why is there such a big emphasis on getting rid of inflammation currently?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to give you the laywoman's words of so as you mentioned, inflammation is so important to our health and well-being. We do need to respond, right? And then that's the body's healing mechanism. When you have chronic inflammation, however, you're breaking down the body's system. So your body is always falsely responding, right? So there's no cut to heal. There's no injury to or bacteria to attack. And in the case of autoimmunity, back to the whole gut thing, most people with autoimmunity have leaky gut. And this inflammatory response that's created, again, is an over response, especially, with certain illnesses like Hashimoto's, where dairy proteins look a lot, to the body or identified like thyroid protein. And so instead of just attacking the dairy, now the body's attacking the thyroid. And so it's really creating over time this chaos in the body that's going on behind the scenes, and we're also good at adapting. We're fatigued, but we push through, and we're not sleeping well, but we get used to it. We accept. I hear it all the time. I'm just getting older. No, that doesn't mean you have to be in pain and exhausted. That's not. So I don't know if that explains it, if that's a too layperson approach for our listeners.
It's a much better explanation than I've done in the past, for sure, because I keep getting questions about, but why is it so bad? But why is it this? And why I don't understand. So, that's the reason why. As a matter of fact, and I'm going to be very honest with you, a very good friend of mine, and this is someone I've known since we were in elementary school. And so we literally grew up together. He has been struggling with an autoimmune disorder for several years, which for the longest time was not adequately diagnosed. And, he had different treatments and he saw different specialists, and it's manifesting a lot in his eyes. So he saw hundreds of ophthalmologists, and he was just tired of getting surgeries and having things and getting things done. And recently he told me, this was November, December, he was about to start an autoimmune diet. And so he started it. And literally a couple of weeks later, he told me, like, you have no idea how well I feel. He's like, and he's shocked that the mainstream doctors that he's visiting, all these rheumatologists, all these ophthalmologists that he's seeing in different countries, he's seeing doctors in Mexico, in the US, and in the UK, probably even here in Spain, because he's currently living here in Spain as well. They haven't been able, or none of them even thought about suggesting this. So it's incredibly sad on the one side, but it's incredibly empowering on the other side that, what, there are solutions, and there are a lot of the times doctors who are wrong, and we should
Absolutely
seek for our truth.
Absolutely. And I'm not opposed to prescriptions or medical treatment. It's just unfortunate that the approach is this. You like you mentioned, the ophthalmologist for the eyes and the rheumatologist for the pain, and as opposed to,
and they draw from a very limited set of knowledge and of expertise and of experience. Like, well, but he's shadowed so and so for so many years. Yeah, but then he's only got that one idea,
right?
And
really knowledgeable about this one little part of the body. Yeah.
And they're practicing with their hands tied, and they're not very welcoming to innovation. So it's a challenge. And I just wish, and that's part of the reason why we're doing this podcast. And we want to get this information out there, because doctors can be wrong at times. And it doesn't mean that they're evil. It doesn't mean that they are not well prepared. It doesn't mean that they want to harm you, that they don't care about your health. I don't believe in those things. Nobody goes into medicine and is tortured for 14 years to get a degree just because they want to they want to be evil, right? So it's really, really good what you're currently doing. Now, you mentioned that you work with patients who have autoimmune disorders, but also other things. How are these other patients finding you? How are these other people finding you if they don't have an autoimmune disorder?
If they don't have an autoimmune disorder, they're usually referred by their physician. I work in cooperation with some amazing functional medicine docs, and so they'll send me a variety of cases, or if they have cases where somebody really wants to improve and they're willing to do the work, but they keep coming back time and time again, and they haven't been able to figure out how to execute, then they'll send them to me. And
Gotcha.
I just do a happy dance when 6 months later we do labs again and all their markers are normal, or they're off their metformin, or I love it. So I do get just as thrilled with anybody taking that power back.
Because that's the thing. It's being empowered. It's having that say that, what, sure, you could continue living on medications. If that works for you, then so be it. But what I never liked was that sentence is like, okay, so this is what it is, and you have no option. Like, no, you do have an option, and it's great that there's people like you who can help patients achieve that. Other than diet, what are the other different areas that you work with them in?
So second to diet always is stress management. I have had the occasional client come in with their diet already dialed in. And I think, oh, what am I going to do now? And, usually their stress level is through the roof. And so I say second to diet, they're pretty equivalent as far as, drivers of inflammation.
Yeah.
So, and again, just like diet, stress management is unique for everybody. I know it's a matter of finding, what works for each individual person, what that looks like in their life. So I personally have had a meditation practice for years. After diet, that was the second big step, that all of a sudden, my sleep was better, like remarkably better. Like I woke up with energy in the morning. I hadn't done that in a decade. So for me, once we start to get those responses for ourselves, like you were mentioning with eating foods understanding, connecting the food to the consequence, right? That's so different than saying this is an anti-inflammatory diet and this is how you need to live. It's finding what foods work for you and knowing what those consequences are. It reinforces the good behavior of avoiding. I won't share what happens to me if I eat gluten, but I promise you I haven't had gluten in a long time. It's been years. It is never worth it. So
I'm guessing it's something more embarrassing than a stuffy nose.
It's not a stuffy nose. I get that from dairy. It's a little more incapacitating than that. Not so much embarrassing. Just, I don't know. And again, I ate gluten for my whole life and didn't realize I had a problem. So it's the same with stress management. It's helping people find that tool, whatever it is, that can be done on a regular, dedicated, daily basis to start to bring those cortisol levels down and start to let that inflammation settle.
I think that contrary to diet, mindfulness is really, really hard to get people to buy into, because number one, it's easy to do. And number two, you don't really get any immediate results, right?
Yes.
I mean, when you're eating, you might not get immediate results, but at least you know that you're going in the right direction. Well, with certain things, you do get like immediate results. You feel bad really, really quickly. With exercise, you feel really good right afterwards. But with meditation, I mean, a lot of the times, I mean, most of us do feel good afterwards. But when people just start, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I just wasted 5 minutes. I just wasted 15 minutes, right? And they're always wondering whether they're doing it wrong or whether they're doing the right thing. They're sitting still. But if you can get past, and what I tell people, if you can get past the first week, then, it gets easier and you start seeing the benefits. And I shared about this. I had the chance of talking to Ariel Garten, and she's the founder of this company called Muse, that they do this brain sensing devices for meditation. It helps you actually learn how to meditate. And funny thing, I learned how to meditate with that device, and I got that device from a Bulletproof conference several years ago. That's where I was introduced. That's where I was introduced to the whole thing. You and I were probably at the same conference that year.
I'm sure.
So
I'm also a Bulletproof coach. So
there you go.
I hit them all. So
there you go. So yeah, probably that's where the whole thing started. But anyway, I was sharing with her how that's the one thing that got started, and my wife now can tell if I've been missing a day or two. And the people around me at the time, the people that I was, the guys in my team, they saw the difference in how I was reacting, because I was very reactive before doing it. I was just very short fused and short tempered and bad tempered, and it just wasn't serving me. And I realized later on, and it obviously helps you manage your stress.
Absolutely. And I wasn't laughing at you that your wife would notice. I had the similar experience.
Oh, don't worry. She laughs at me all the time. So I'm
but our loved ones are really good input if we can handle it, the honesty. I had the same experience with my daughter, who was then a teenager, when I was several months down the road in my meditation practice, and I was doing Ziva meditation, Emily Fletcher's program. And so I was meditating twice a day, and I always hit the morning, but sometimes I'd miss the afternoon meditation. And if I missed it for more than 2 days in a row, my daughter would say, "Mom, do you need to meditate?" I apparently am not as self-aware as you. I thought I was fine, but she would notice. She said, "How about if I drive and you meditate while I drive?"
Exactly. So it does play a huge role, and just to pile on the importance of stress, especially with somebody who has a diagnosis, is the mere fact that you have a diagnosis, and that a lot of the doctors, a lot of the books out there, a lot of the Google searches are telling you that you're going to have that for life. That in and of itself is another huge driver of stress. So
absolutely. Everybody with autoimmunity, I say, with diagnosis or not, really anybody struggling with chronic illness, when you wake up fatigued in the morning and you have to work that much harder just to participate in life, that's a chronic stress for sure.
Absolutely. And that again, it's just a vicious cycle where you get more inflammation and then you're affecting everything else. Now, you also mentioned, or you spoke a little bit about sleep.
Yes.
I think sleep has been finally getting the right place. We're starting to get past that whole hustle mentality that if I need to sleep just 2 hours, I'll sleep 2 hours. And we're finally realizing that we kind of need those 8 hours. So what is your take on that?
I couldn't agree more. The body is doing some really important stuff when we're sleeping, and a lot of it only does when we sleep. So, you
Such
know, I,
as,
d- such as detoxifying is a big one, and healing is another one. So, when you're shorting yourself of that, and often the people that I work with, they want to sleep, but they're in pain, or so there's often a lot of factors that play into it. And I don't say everybody needs 8 hours. I do. I'll admit it. I can get 7 here and there, but like consistently, I need 8 hours most nights to be my best, to perform my best, and to feel my best. But if you're a 6 hour, you know, a night guy, and that really truly works for you, then
well,
I say great.
the statistics are piled against you. There's only like
Yeah.
5% of the population who can really
It's a very small percentage.
function in less than 5 hours. The one thing that does change a lot is your chronotype. So some people might
Yes.
fall, go to sleep much later than others, but we all still need those 8 hours, 7, 8 hours at the very minimum. And like you very well said, you can get away with 7 or
Right.
6,
But not
every now and again, but
right.
but but not for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, out of these things that you help your clients with, what is the thing, or the one, or more than one thing, that you get most resistance from?
Oh, it depends on the client. I would actually say the big two. I would say diet change and stress management, or the word, you notice I don't use it often, the word meditate.
Yeah.
People like, oh, the hackles go up. I've tried it. I can't do it. And same with diet, because the word diet, I don't mean diet as in this is a diet that you're on for a short period of time. This is your new lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? This is just how you feed your body. And so many people come to me with so much history with both of those things, with a lack of success of
Yeah.
following a diet or an eating plan. And that I would say those are the biggest areas of resistance that I see.
Well, I think that when people learn about an autoimmune diet and they realize, it's very easy for them to focus on all the things that they will no longer eat. Um, but having said that, remember this friend that I was telling you about? I spoke to him in November or December, and he told me about this. And I said, "Oh, so when are you starting?" He said, "Right after the holidays, because we're traveling to Mexico, and I don't want to have to stop doing all those things." And when I spoke to him afterwards, he was like, "I should have done this before. It would have been hard being back at home and
Right.
and not being able to eat those things, but feeling how I feel today, like pff, I would have done it." And that seems to be the consensus, but it's still a big change, isn't it?
It is, and I do think the magic is when we get to that point where we've reclaimed our life, right? Then it's reinforcing enough that and it's meal by meal, day by day, vacation by vacation.
Yeah.
And I will say the whole holiday family history, emotion connected in with all of that tends to be the biggest hurdle for most people with creating that change. Their
Yeah.
comfort foods, I want to eat what my mom used to make me. As my son with celiac says, remember when I would feel sick and you'd give me saltines? I'm like, God,
No, I
yes, I
don't.
do remember. I'm
No,
sorry.
I don't.
I'm a terrible mother.
You know what? But that
I
exact
know.
that example just goes exactly, and I do want to emphasize it, because I know that a lot of our listeners are moms and dads, and who
Sure.
listen to the podcast, and then they contact me and say like, "Oh my God, I'm the worst mother because I've been doing this for so long." And like, no, because
We
you
do
were
what
not
we know.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You make the best decisions with the information that you have at the time. And like now, if you do it now, then you're being a not so great mother. But now you've got new
right,
information. Now
right.
you're
Absolutely.
empowered to make better choices.
Look, my dairy farm family, we ate margarine in the 80s. Like we did.
Oh God.
How horrible is that? You know, when I finally healed and learned, I did go through this little period of like anger. Of
Well, you
like,
do, of course, and you're
we
trying
were
to
so
blame someone,
stupid.
you're trying to do those things, but then you realize, like, you know what? Nobody makes those decisions wanting to hurt somebody else, and nobody
Sure.
made those trying to hurt themselves. You make those
Right.
decisions thinking that it is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and I think that's one of the big challenges that people, that people will often go through, especially with somebody, like the kind of clients that you have. It's like, they they've been doing it for their entire lives, and suddenly you go and tell them, you know what, the problem isn't really that you were unlucky. The problem is that you've been doing this for your
Right.
entire life.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge mindset shift and paradigm shift for people. And that's why I so appreciate you and what you do and being able to talk to you about it. I don't want to sing it from the rooftops like, no, you can heal, you can heal. My best day in the past 5 years was when my rheumatologist dismissed me. He said, there's like, I'm here, but there's no reason for you to ever come back. And great guy. Unfortunately, he didn't take the next step and say, what are you doing so I can help my other patients?
That was my next question. That was my next question. I was just gonna say, like, please tell me that he asked you what you're doing, and to make sure, whenever I hear someone say something like that, and they're like, oh, I went to see my doctor and he said that what I'm currently doing, it shouldn't be working, but that if it's working for me, to just keep doing it, instead of just saying, listen, let's figure it out. Let's see if somebody else is going to
Learn
get
from
those same
this.
results, right?
Yeah. No,
Shocking.
it's, but again, I'm going to take what you said before, which is probably the case that, somewhere in his mind, he probably thinks I was misdiagnosed that whole time.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
that, and then you have to couple that. There's also a lot of red tape and the practice of
Oh,
medicine.
sure.
And if doctors were able to really just practice, and the thing is this, you go down there and you develop your skill set and you learn a bunch of different things. But the problem is that then you're supposed to follow a set of guidelines. You're not
Sure.
allowed to say, you know what, based on my experience, based on the things I've learned, based on
Right.
the things I know, then I think this could work. Because the moment that you do that, they're, oh, no, that's not part of the guidelines,
It's
and you can get
witchcraft.
your license revoked and you can get in
Right.
trouble. So a lot of them, they're like, you know what, I'm really really happy for Julie, but yeah, have a, take
Yeah.
care.
And honestly, I mean, he what do they get? 15 minutes per patient? You can't help somebody create lifestyle change in
Yeah.
15 minutes every 4 months. Like that's not going to happen.
Yeah, we,
So
we we used to get really disappointed when we were doing the stem cell treatments, and a lot of the times we knew that we could help a patient, we can help improve them. You don't cure anything with stem cells, and it's important to put that out there. But you could help them, improve their quality of life, do all those things, and then they would say like, oh, let me just talk to my doctor. And I knew how that went. 99 times out of 100, the doctor would talk them out of it. And my idea was always, you know what, if I could just get that doctor to understand and to see what we're currently doing, that'd be great. And most of the time, they don't even want, I mean, they can't agree with you because of all that red tape. And when it really clicked was when the same doctor who would talk one of our patients out of it then had a relative who could benefit from our services, and
oh
they would put him
wow.
in touch with us. And that's like, this kind of like doesn't make sense. But you know what? You obviously
It's
realize,
sad.
it's the relative. They're trying things that are out of the box because they realize that their
Sure.
toolbox does not have the right tools for this. So, thankfully, I think, part of the silver lining, and I've been having that conversation with some of our colleagues as well, is that I think that with this whole outbreak, a lot of things are going to change in healthcare and healthcare delivery. And a lot of doctors are tired of the red tape, and I think that's going to change. So I'm looking forward to that part of this outbreak.
I so hope so. I know there are going to be several silver linings. And I really do hope, I think there's been a movement brewing, and we all know things have to shift. And so, I hope from your lips, as they say, that, that is one of the remarkable results from this, that
Sure.
shift is complete.
So Julie, this has been so far a great interview, but there's still some things that I would like your help with. For those of our listeners who are listening to you right now and who don't have an autoimmune, or who think they don't have an autoimmune disorder or a food sensitivity or a diagnosed chronic disease, what would you like for them to take away from this conversation? What are top 2 or 3 pieces of actionable advice that you could give these people to start improving their life?
Absolutely. So the beauty of what I do is it works for everybody. So I've had people that I've worked with that say, I feel great except for this one little thing, and I would say, unless you spring out of bed every morning, right, and feel amazing, have no aches and pains, feel younger than you felt last year, it is worth taking a few steps to see if you maybe have some inflammation brewing that you could get rid of to feel so much better. So one of the things I recommend for the general public, I mentioned before, I love elimination diets. I'm also Whole30 coach because it's such an accessible program that's free for the general public, that basically you take away this handful of inflammatory foods for a month and you reintroduce them really methodically and see. So it's a great chance for people to explore, their bodies and what really should they be eating, what should they be limiting, or what should they be avoiding.
Wow, that's a great one, and absolutely right. I think everyone could benefit from it. And worst case scenario, you're going to eliminate all those things for a couple of weeks, and then you're going to reintroduce them, and you're going to feel exactly the same. And then it's like, okay, great, I did it, and nothing affects me. I highly doubt that, but
I do too. Thank you. Or Bulletproof Diet. That's another great one. Any accessible diet, program like that.
The first one that I learned about, and I don't remember if I tried it, but it was JJ Virgin's. So the Virgin Diet was, it's also basically an elimination diet.
Yes.
Except I didn't like it because she asked you to take off eggs, and it's like kind of like that's a food group for me.
I understand. I eliminated eggs last year just to see, because that's another one in the autoimmune protocol that you eliminate is eggs. And I will say, in the autoimmune population, they do tend to be a bigger problem for people. Thank goodness. It is a food group for me too. Somebody asked me, what's the one food, that you have to have in your house right now? And I was like, eggs. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We go through 36 eggs a week here at home, and it's just my wife, myself, and our baby. That's it.
Yep.
And some weeks we don't even make it. It's like, oh my God, there's no eggs, and we're not going back out until tomorrow, or we're not shopping it tomorrow or the day after. Our baby, he'll eat. I mean, he's still a baby. He's a toddler.
He's your baby.
Yeah, he'll have 2 eggs per day for breakfast, right? And he'll just devour them. My wife is pregnant, and she has 3 or 4 eggs. And funny thing, she's been going here in Spain. It's public health, so everyone has access to that. And since she's pregnant, she's going in there. And the dietary recommendations that are being given to her by the public health system here in Spain are shocking. They're telling her to eat pasta. They're telling her to eat grains. They're telling her to eat rice. They're telling her to cut down the fat. They're telling her to just eat egg whites. And I'm shocked. And I'm like, what did they tell you? So here's the other thing. She banned me from going to the consults with her because I make faces. I laugh. She's like, you cannot come. You cannot come with me anymore. So now she goes on her own, and she just comes back and tells me, and like, I can't believe they're saying this. And they're asking me, what did I eat? And so I'm like, what do you tell her? And I said, she says, well, 4 eggs and bacon. Like, you should have seen her face. That must have been a fun one. But yeah, we're shocked. We're shocked by the recommendations that they're giving out to these people. And they're telling you, like, you have to eat this and 5 meals a day and rice. And I mean, it's carbs, low fat. So kind of like, oh, that's pretty bad.
We still have some work to do for sure. We definitely, it's not that much different in this country. There's
Oh
still that push
no.
for whole grains and,
Yeah, no.
it's very
I'm
similar.
not bashing Spain. I'm bashing the
No,
health
in general.
establishment in general. So
Yeah.
the public health and the recommendations that are being given out as part of public health are doing a disservice to the entire world. Same thing happens in Mexico, and
Well,
it's
and
shocking.
that's one of people ask me all the time, like, why is autoimmunity on the rise? And in the early 90s, I actually taught autistic children. So I love that we have that overlap, because that was the beginning of still no understanding about the gut. But, there were the parents that were ridiculed,
Yeah.
for holding orange dye away from their autistic children and seeing the improvements and, starting to play with the diet and the connection on that. And so I
Yeah,
apologize.
and every day that goes by, we have more frankenfoods out in the marketplace.
Mhm.
We have less quality. We have less real foods out there. You look at all this big push for veganism right now, and you look at all that processed schlop that they're passing out for
Oh,
food,
yep.
and they're like, well, you should eat this is healthier and this is planet healthy. And like, how can it be better for you or for the environment to eat that amount of processed crap? Because that's literally what it is, and we're seeing more and more and more of that in everywhere. And it's no wonder that we're seeing more autoimmune disorders. It's no wonder that we're seeing more cognitive problems. It's no wonder that we're seeing more Alzheimer, more heart disease, more of everything that's killing us. So
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the top problem, and it is a global problem. I mean, you even look at smaller countries where, they lasted a whole lot longer with what I would call real food.
yeah,
But, we've managed to invade, get our junk over there.
yeah,
So it's a big challenge and opportunity, and it's not something that can't be turned around. And I think the more people understand and vote with their dollar, so to speak, and,
exactly.
stick, I used to laugh at the whole idea of sticking to the outside of the grocery store. I go two places in my grocery store. I go to the produce section and I go to the meat section and I leave. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's so, yeah, I think that it's just a matter of us beating the drum harder, louder,
for
longer,
sure,
and
for sure.
people will learn and catch on.
Yeah. Now, you're not getting off the hook so easy. You just gave us
Yes,
one piece of actionable advice. So we're still
yes,
missing at
yes.
least one more, two, if you're feeling generous.
I want to give you two, because
Awesome.
they're just all so important. So we talked about stress management. So I challenge your audience to create, whether it's sitting outside in nature, which is one of my favorite, or if you're lucky enough to be somewhere where you can go for a walk safely right now, walk in nature. But it's either spending time in nature. There's so many free meditation apps. Like, you don't have to spend any money. Experiment, explore, but give yourself 10 minutes a day. I mean, I would bargain with you, 5 would even be good to
Yeah.
start with. So it doesn't need to be life-changing, but it will change your life. So
There's that Buddhist saying that, that they say that, or they told one of these old masters, how long you should meditate. And he says, well, you should aim to meditate for at least, or for 5 minutes a day, or for 15 minutes a day, unless you don't have time, in which case you should meditate for an hour.
right. Love it. Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the biggest people, I don't have time. I don't have time. You will expand your time if you commit to the practice. So whatever that looks like for you, it could be, 5 minutes petting your dog and really being present with your dog. Like, I
Yeah.
really get creative, people. I have lots of clients that their mindfulness time is art related. Right now, people are home, so that's kind of a good thing for people
Yeah.
to get in touch with.
Tai Chi is also a good one.
Yes, very, very good. So that's my number 2 is let's get that stress reduced, especially now, like, whose stress level isn't slightly elevated right now. Just if for no other reason, just the changes.
Yeah.
So that's a great tool.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Julie, I do want to acknowledge you not only for taking the time to join us, very graciously wait for me that I was late. Obviously, people are listening to this and they don't know that we started recording
You
late.
know.
You've been very, very kind with your time with us here. But I do want to acknowledge for you for the work that you're currently doing. You're absolutely right. I think that more people need to know these things. More people need to learn that there are solutions to their problems, that there are things they can do in order to improve their life and to stop suffering and to stop living a less than amazing life. So the fact that you're spending your time doing this is really, really good. And I do want to acknowledge you for doing that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I am genuinely passionate about what I do. And I love that you said amazing life, because that's what everybody should be striving for. And that's what we all can have. It doesn't just have to be survival. It is at its meekest, it should be amazing. So I'm
Exactly.
grateful.
Exactly. So where can people go and find out more about you and what you're currently doing and how you can help them out?
Absolutely. Best way to reach me is through my website, is juliemichelson.com. There's no A in Michelson. It's spelled wrong. It's Michelson. Or I'm Julie.Michelson on Instagram, Julie Michelson Coaching on Facebook. Hit me
Perfect.
up at any of those spots.
We'll put all of those links in our show notes. You guys listen to this, you know the drill. Just scroll down either on YouTube or your podcast app, and you can find the links right there. You can just tap them and go directly there. Julie, any parting wisdom for our listeners?
First of all, really quickly, I want to add in, I want people, because I said 3, so I want to give 3. Super fast. Guys, get your sleep, especially if you're home right now. Maintain that sleep schedule. Don't be binging Netflix all night long and going to sleep at 4 a.m. Maintain your sleep schedule. So sorry for that. I didn't want to lie. I wanted to give 3.
That's
and
perfect.
I want everybody out there to know that there is hope, whether you're just not feeling as great as you used to feel, or you actually have a diagnosis of a chronic illness. There absolutely are things you can do to take your power back and live your best life.
Perfect. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Thank you so much for sharing those. And you're absolutely right. And that's why I also used it, use that expression, because we need to live a great life. And it's not normal to have aches and pains as we age. It's not normal to have low energy. It's not normal to have, to be bloated. So we deserve to live a great life. Thank you so much for reminding us of that. And one final question: did you have a good time here on the Highway Health Show?
I had a blast.
That's amazing. That's what I like to hear. I hope everyone listening also had a blast. You know the drill. I'll be here next week, and you can find the links to everything down in this episode's description. If you have questions, you can send them to me at dre.show. And if they're pertaining to Julie, I'll make sure to forward it to her, and hopefully we can get a follow-up episode. I hope you had a great week. Julie, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dr. E. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Dr. E's Highway to Health show, helping you learn the science of living ageless. Did you enjoy the show? Please like, share, and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Dr. E wants to hear from you. Go to dre.show. Again, that's dre.show. Until next time, this is Dr. E's Highway to Health, helping you live ageless.
So there you have it. That was my conversation with Julie Michelson. I hope you enjoyed it and got a few good reasons to try an elimination diet regardless of whether you have a diagnosed autoimmune disorder or not. What was your favorite takeaway? Tag me on Instagram or connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you think. By the way, remember that you can find the links to everything we discussed in this episode in the show notes. Just scroll down to this episode's description on your podcast app and tap on the appropriate link. Speaking of links, remember to check out podcastinthebox.co for all your podcasting needs. If you're a busy entrepreneur looking to grow a personal brand and instill trust in your clients, there is no better way to do it than with a podcast. To learn how the team at Podcast in a Box can help you do just that, simply head on over to podcastintheBox.co and find out more. Oh, and if you already have a podcast and find it hard and time consuming to keep up, they can help with that as well. Seriously, they're amazing. Just head on over to podcastinthebox.co and let them know that Dr. E sent you. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You've been listening to Julie Michelson and Dr. E talk about overcoming autoimmunity, battling inflammation, and living an amazing life. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you here next week. And remember, you are on the highway to health, and I'm your guide to get you there.